The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Maynard Bangs presiding. Your eyes for the Honorable Judge Bangs.
Thank you, Bailiff. Good to see you back, Bailiff. We've been missing you.
You know it.
Well, then fuck you, Bailiff. Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Today, we are hearing the case of My Cousin Vinny versus Injustice for All. My Cousin Vinny is a 1992 comedy film about a loudmouth New York lawyer who goes down to rural Alabama to defend his wrongfully accused relative. Injustice for All is a 1979 legal comedy drama. Are you sure about that, Wikipedia? About a defense attorney who finds himself in a moral quagmire when he's forced to defend a guilty judge in a rape case. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, in civil cases like this, the counsel appointed to represent each film will present their case for why their client is the superior movie. And ultimately, the jury will render its verdict as to which is the superior film. This decision will hereby stand in all rankings and listicles from now on until the end of time ad infinitum. Mr. Brooks Eason, you are representing My Cousin Vinny. You may begin your opening statement.
Thank you very much. It is my distinct honor and privilege to represent one of the great comedy films of the late 20th century. I have practiced law for 40 years and have been very fond of many of my clients, but none as fond as I am of this one. What a wonderful movie it is. In the movie, as you may recall, Joe Pesci, playing Vinny Gambini, dozes through the prosecutor's opening statement because of lack of sleep. Then he gets up and gives a very brief opening on behalf of the defendants. He said, this is the entire opening statement, he said, everything that guy just said is bullshit. Well, I'm going to give an opening statement that is even shorter. 2 words. Marissa Tomei.
Yeah.
God bless. Not guilty.
Any rest.
No, I'm kidding. We have to go through the motions. But thank you, Mr.
Marissa
Eason.
Tomei is all I have to say.
Well, we'll get a couple more words going for when the case gets underway, though.
I will tell you that I watched the movie with my wife and friends the other night. And when Marissa Tomei took the stand, one of my friends said, I would do her. And this was a heterosexual woman. But let me say a few words about the movie that poor Dylan has been required to defend in this proceeding. I've had cases in my long career in which I was the overwhelming favorite, and it's really nerve-wracking. When you go into a case and there's sort of no way you can lose, that's hard. I don't see any way I can lose.
Been there, Freddie.
I think I watched Injustice for All 40 years ago when I was a mere youngster. Well, I watched it again this afternoon, and it literally drove me to drink. And I started drinking during the movie, and I've been drinking ever since. My wife Carrie turned to me about 2/3 of the way in and said, I skipped a trip to the grocery store for this. It is, I figured it was going to be better. I didn't remember it being a bad movie, but it's a terrible movie. It's the characters are awful. The script is totally unbelievable. they have this goofy scene in the bathroom with these people faking like they're really laughing. It's really just not a good movie at all. And you said that this movie was described as a comedy drama. Well, there's no humor in the movie at all. It's really just a sad, depressing movie about terrible people in the criminal justice system in Baltimore, and but it's my movie is a classic comedy. Everybody remembers lines. The Two Utes. I mean, it is. I smiled through it again from beginning to end the other night when I watched it. I didn't smile once today when I struggled through Injustice for All. But comparing a comedy to a drama is difficult. It's comparing apples and oranges. But I will say this: my movie's apples are far bigger than Mr. Schlender's oranges.
Oh, and I'm sure you're going to mash them into a pulp.
Oh,
but thank you,
jeez.
Mr. Eason. Appearing on behalf of And Justice for All is Mr. Dylan J. Schlender. Please present your opening statement.
Your Honor, Mr. Foreman, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Is this Pacino?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You couldn't tell?
My name is Dylan J. Schlender, and I am the counsel for Injustice for All. Now, that man over there, he's the attorney for my cousin Vinny, and he couldn't be happier today. You just heard him with all these apples and oranges. He is a happy man today because he's going after a good movie. And if he gets him, he's going to be a star. His books are going to fly off the shelves. Now, in order to win this case, he needs you, naturally. You're all he's got, believe me. So he's counting on tapping that emotion in you that says, let's give it to my cousin Vinny. However, these proceedings are not about that. These proceedings are here to see that justice is done. And justice, as any reasonable person will tell you, is the finding of the truth. And what is the truth today? That my client is the superior movie. And it is with great restraint that I end this ripped-off opening statement, lest I throw my movie under the bus while screaming in my
You were just under the line for copyright infringement, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schlender. I want to hear you work on your hoo-ah.
All right, hoo-ha, you're going to hear it.
Mr. Eason, please proceed with your first exhibit.
Well, Mr. Schlender's right that I'm a happy man today. And the reason I'm a happy man is because on a scale of 1 to 10, my movie is a 13 and his is a 2. There's no competition between these two movies. Does anybody remember anything other than Mr. Schlender's plagiarized opening statement that he just gave in that movie? I suggest not.
Several severe bummers.
Yeah, let me make a few brief points about why My Cousin Vinny is a great movie and one of the classics of American comedy from the late 20th century. The first thing I will say is that the casting in the movie is perfect. Joe Pesci, the magnificent Marissa Tomei, obviously. Fred Gwynn as the judge, Judge Chamberlain Haller, who was that was his last role. He died soon after the filming was complete. Lane Smith as the prosecutor was great. You will recall when he says identical. But even the smaller roles in the movie, the roles that are cameos, are great. The fact witnesses in the trial were great. The man who claimed that no self-respecting Southerner would ever make instant grits was great. But
is that true? Question from the bench.
Huh? Well, I don't make grits, so I have no comment on that. But but the best of all of the supporting actors was an actor named Austin Pendleton. That name may not be familiar to you. You may not know who he played. He played the magnificent stuttering public defender. He was only on camera for 5 minutes at most, and he made the absolute most of it. He was perfect. The second thing I will say about the movie is there are no villains in the movie at all, unlike poor Mr. Schlender's movie, in which damn near everybody's terrible. All of the people in My Cousin Vinny are good people. They're honest. They're kind. The only villains in the movie really are the two young men who never appear on camera, who actually did rob the convenience store and murder the clerk. And
That's good. I'd like to just let Mr. Schlender respond to that point about the lack of villains.
I think so I want to touch on a few things because Brooks mentioned the cast, and obviously the cast of My Cousin Vinny is something that the movie is well known for. Marissa Tomei winning an Oscar for Fred Gwynne as the judge, but I don't think we could sleep on Injustice for All's cast because first of all, we have Al Pacino really carrying the movie through a whole range of emotions, right? He's manic, he's sad, he's funny. He's really doing it all, whereas the characters in My Cousin Vinny are just kind of sticking to their box. They don't have a tremendous amount of range. And let's not forget, too, that in Justice for All, we have Jeffrey Tambor, who's hilarious, and I just think it's very funny that there was a moment where him being bald was a shock because obviously he's very famously bald now. So we have two strong casts, but I feel, and I think the jury will agree with me, that Injustice for All's cast has more room to play with their characters, to expand their characters and make the world feel a little more lived in. Now, as far as this villain,
well, now I'd like to let Mr. Eason respond to that point. Do the characters in My Cousin Vinny have range?
What about Marissa Tomei when she addresses Vinny when he's about to go deer hunting? Do you recall that scene where she talks about the beautiful deer, and it's beautiful? She calls it a deer, the beautiful deer, and its little deer lips bending down to drink out of the clear mountain stream, and BAM! A fucking bullet in her head, blows her brains out. She's got remarkable range.
We're not talking about Marissa Tomei's head was not blown off, right? Correct.
No, it was the deer. Praise the Lord,
God.
It was not Marissa Tomei's head, or indeed any other part of her. I would say about the acting in Justice for All. See, I can't even remember the name of the movie. And the acting in that movie, it was extremely overacted. It seemed to me. I mean,
let me object to that real quick.
Al Pacino's an emotional wreck, and he comes up and starts bashing his law partner's car with his briefcase, and then you've got that goofy scene in the bathroom where the soon-to-be bald guy and the other law partner are laughing hysterically, and so is Al Pacino, and it's not believable.
Well, so let me address that, Brooks, because in Justice for All, the whole movie is basically a satire, right? Where it's a commentary on the legal system and the people who are in it, who are good, bad, indifferent. Everyone's a little gray, like we were talking about earlier. And so this, what you called overacting, isn't them overacting. This is them responding to the absurdity of every situation they're in. That absurdity compounding. So you have Al Pacino trying to get an innocent man out of jail. You have him trying to keep a guilty man free. And this stuff is building and building and building on him. We see Jeffrey Tambor crack because of it. And then, of course, the very famous sequence at the end of the movie where he's giving his opening statement. And obviously everything just snaps. So what you call overacting is actually building up to this huge moment at the end of the movie. One of the reasons the movie's so well loved today, because of that moment and the commentary it provides. So that exaggerated laughter, that frustration of hitting with the briefcase against his legal partner's car, those are all bricks building up to this very strong feature that we're discussing today.
I'd like Mr. Eason, if you want to respond to any performances in your film besides Marissa Tomei, and then I'm going to let Mr. Schlender respond to the no villains.
Joe Pesci is great in the role. He's perfect for the New York lawyer, or lawyer to be, coming down south and playing the role, and coming to court improperly dressed, uh, and talking about the two Utes. He's great for the role. I will say though that Marissa Tomei almost turns Joe Pesci into a straight man. Uh, the judge Fred
She has that
Gwynne,
effect on people.
yeah, yeah. Damn! Wow, you get a vote from me for that. So Fred Gwynn was exquisite as the judge. He's a Yale educated Southern man, and he's got this rude Yankee come down to try the case, and he's just perfect for the role. Uh, Lane Smith as the prosecutor, the other primary character, is just right, and he's a kind man. Poor Vinny and Mona Lisa Vito. They can't sleep. He offers them his hunting cabin, where Vinny comes out trying to shoot an owl in the middle of the night. And but he's a good lawyer. He's competent. He's kind to Vinny, and at the end, one of the things I like about the movie is at the end of it, when it turns out that the two Utes from New York are not guilty, and they've discovered who was guilty, that uh, the judge, the prosecutor, and the sheriff all are happy that justice has been done.
That sounds like a great segue to you, Mr. Schlender, responding to the point of no villains in My Cousin Vinny versus the stark black and white.
No, it is an interesting point in My Cousin Vinny. It's like they are interested in justice, but the thing about My Cousin Vinny, especially as it compares to And Justice for All, is just how contrived and manufactured everything in My Cousin Vinny feels, right? Like Fred Gwynn's character he doesn't feel like he's a lived-in character. He's a judge made specifically to get on Vinny's nerve and Vinny to get on his. So every character is just so meticulously crafted for this story to work that they don't really feel like they could live outside this world. Whereas in Injustice for All, it feels like we're just waking up in an average day of Al Pacino. You believe everything that he's going through. You believe he's been dealing with it for a long time. It has a very organic feel that makes the message of the movie a lot more powerful. That makes that message of that justice is complicated, that government is uncaring. These many things that the movie tried to address, you're able to do it because these characters don't feel so manufactured. Every choice that's made in My Cousin Vinny is to serve the comedic elements. And some of these choices are very well done, don't get me wrong. But if you're going character for character, they're just far too contrived compared to Injustice for All.
All right, we have heard a lot about the characters. Mr. Eason, I'd like you to respond if you want to move on to or if you want to present another exhibit.
No, I need to say something about that. Wow. So you think the characters in Injustice for All are not contrived? I saw that
they are, but they feel more natural about it. They feel more organic. It feels like a lived-in world that we're getting a peek into. Whereas My Cousin Vinny only exists within the four walls of that court. Like those characters only exist for that one court case. You can't see how they would live beyond it.
Well, I've practiced law for 40 years, and I looked at Injustice for All today a dozen times and said that could never happen. And not only that, but the Jack Warden character, great actor. I thought he's going to be good in this, and his character was totally contrived. The goofy helicopter flight, the ridiculous eating lunch out on the ledge outside the fourth floor window, the attempted suicides. It was just ridiculous. I just thought.
Yeah,
and
but part of
the
that,
guy who shaves his hair and shows up at the party and starts throwing plates down the hall.
Mr. Schlender, let him finish.
There was I just kept shaking my head and thinking, wow, if I liked that movie 40 years ago, my judgment has improved since then.
Mr. Schlender, your response.
Okay, so these elements that you're talking about, like the judge with the death wish with the helicopter, Jeffrey Tambor throwing the plates, that is where the comedic elements actually do come in for And Justice for All. And again, it's to highlight the absurdity of the system, because this is a satire, right? So they need to exaggerate certain things to get these messages across. And it's funny because Al Pacino's character is very aware of these things. He's constantly pointing them out. He's saying, we've got a judge with a death wish presiding over people's well-being, and then he's saying, like the only reason you want me to be his defense lawyer is because of my impeccable ethical character, and if I don't do it, you're going to destroy me because of my less than impeccable ethical character. So the fact that he's pointing out and realizing the absurdity of these things is what makes the movie good, and that's what makes it fun. So we're along for the ride. We're peeping into this world where everything's crazy. It's of course it's contrived in so much as it's not real, but those elements are to serve the satire and make a broader point, whereas those elements in My Cousin Vinny don't serve a broader point beyond just making the movie funny.
Well, I'm I suppose not as sophisticated a movie watcher as you are, but
you're probably just as sophisticated as
I did not regard And Justice for All as a satire or as a comedy, but it's just bad. I'm in the scene where Al Pacino tells his girlfriend, and how ridiculous is that? How he beds her, but
yes, it's supposed to be ridiculous.
Well, okay, well, but how about believable? It was not believable, and but where he tells her about the judge with the suicide. You're not even looking at this judge with the suicide. This crazy judge, and I'm thinking two things. One is he's ratting out his good friend, the judge, and two, the judge is a good judge. Why should this committee? We never understand why the committee is corrupt, except when we see the picture of the chairman schlepping around naked with the judge. But it's just not. It's just why should the judge, who's nutty, be the subject of a committee investigation when everybody agrees he's a fine judge? And it just none of it's buttoned up. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think the point there is Al Pacino's character would argue that the committee shouldn't exist because they're not going to get any work done anyway. So I wouldn't say he was throwing the judge under the bus, but he was using that as an example to show how they weren't serious. They said, look, everyone knows this guy is eccentric, and you're not looking at him. Instead, you're looking at good lawyers. So that would be the point there. It wasn't about throwing him under the bus. It was about showing how ineffective and unserious the committee was.
Well, if he wanted to show that the committee was ineffective and unserious, he should have come up with an example of something the committee should have been looking at. I just thought, this is just, it's not real. It's not persuasive. I kept looking at it and thinking this couldn't possibly ever happen. At the end of the movie, when they give these opening statements, and I understand there's a lot in My Cousin Vinny that's not real, but it's a comedy. And it's not. But at the end of this, And Justice for All, when they give these competing opening statements, and I thought no lawyer would get away with saying any of those things in an opening statement, and yet there they went.
They could in this courtroom.
That's true. But this is a fake court, I remind you. Mr. Eason, would you like to proceed to your next exhibit?
Let's see. Let me think what I was on before I got so repeatedly interrupted. But
it's a conversation, Mr. Eason.
I have two more points I wish to make in support of my case. One is, I thought one of the things about My Cousin Vinny that makes it universally popular among New Yorkers and Southerners is that The movie poked fun at people from both regions, but didn't denigrate either one. The prosecutor was a fine lawyer. The judge was a fine judge and Yale educated. Uh, Vinny was faking it as a lawyer, but he turned out to be a great lawyer. Marissa Tomei, a great witness, a great looking woman, and a great mechanic. And so, all of these people at the end of the movie are revealed in a good light. Nobody was lying, and the movie poked fun at the accents and the culture and the grits and the Utes and all of that, but without denigrating either one.
Mr. Schlender, any response to the characterization of New Yorkers and Southerners in My Cousin Vinny?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think what Brooks said is a fair characterization of what we saw in My Cousin Vinny. I mean, they're all kind of cookie cutter in their own way, and there's nothing broadly offensive about those portrayals. They're not really pushing the envelope or making a commentary on anything, though. That commentary aspect, I think, is what gives And Justice for All a leg up, is that they're able to maybe not play with stereotypes the way we see so broadly, or so clearly, rather, in My Cousin Vinny with, New Yorkers and Southerners in here. But, we have some of those stereotypes about lawyers and defense lawyers and judges that we see in Justice for All that service that larger commentary that we don't see in My Cousin Vinny.
Mr. Eason, would you like to go to your final point?
Okay, this is my final point. And this from my opening statement. There is nothing in the world sexier than a beautiful woman who is also funny. Marissa Tomei, who won an Academy Award, carries the movie. She is the star. I assume y'all have perhaps watched Lonesome Dove, just as Lonesome Dove appears to have been written for Robert Duvall to play Augustus McCrae. He's exquisite in that role. This movie appears to have been written for Marissa Tomei to play Mona Lisa Vito. The scenes that she carries away when she's bailing Vinny out, I think for the second time, but maybe the first time, when he's been held in contempt, and she says, "You're a smooth talker. You are. And then when she talks about the deer hunting and the little deer and the deer lips, and when she bangs her feet, when she's wearing this pantsuit on the porch of the cabin, and she bangs her feet and talks about the fact that her biological clock is ticking. And then in the courtroom, when she testifies, she is spectacular. She is the best actor in either of the two movies. She's far better than Al Pacino in And Justice for All. She's far better than any of the actors in My Cousin Vinny.
Well, that's good. We have heard a lot about Marissa Tomei, but before we conclude, is there anything you'd like to say about what My Cousin Vinny might have to say about the justice system? Does it have anything to say?
I think one of the messages from the movie is that ultimately the justice system works. Vinny came south. He didn't talk right. He didn't dress right. He had these two clients. But, when at the end of the movie, you'll remember this, and he discovers that the 64 Tempest, I think, is the only car that could have made these tracks. And he asked the sheriff to check on it. and the sheriff comes back in, and they nod to each other, and the sheriff testifies about it. You know, the sheriff, who's been working for the prosecution, is also working for justice, and justice was served.
All right, thank you. Mr. Schlender, I'm going to allow you to proceed with your first exhibit, but before I do, would you like to respond to either what my cousin Vinny has to say about the legal system or what Injustice for All has to say about it?
Well, I think I'll get to that in my argumentation.
Oh, okay,
Your
then
Honor.
I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Then you proceed
Yeah.
with your first exhibit.
Absolutely, yeah.
You smart Alec.
I know, it's almost
This
like
court
a
has
lawyer said that
contempt
to
for
me
you,
once.
Mr. Schlender.
Well, that's not new. So I've touched on a lot of my points in responding to Brooks, but I just want to revisit a couple and expand on a few little things. When we look at the conflict in both movies, right? We were talking about My Cousin Vinny not having villains, and it's about serving justice. It's like, okay, that's a good feel-good message, but like, what are the tribulations that Vinny actually has to go through? He basically kind of flubs his first court appearance, but then after that, it is remarkably smooth sailing for him. There is really not a lot of conflict in this movie. It's just him having funny bits with the witnesses discrediting them. Like, he goes along swimmingly, even when the FBI car expert shows up. He's just able to roll with it. And, again, these characters are just made so perfectly to fit into this story that not only does he recognize the car that it would have to be, he knows he could call Marissa Tomei to the stand to be an expert witness, even though he could have called the FBI guy up and grilled him on these points. Because, again, he figured this all out before Marissa Tomei explained it, because he gave the note to the sheriff to solve. So as the viewer, too, so there's two things here. Again, he completely overcomes this conflict with ease. And us
Barely
as
an
viewers,
inconvenience.
yes, super easy, barely inconvenience. Oh, really? Yeah, he knows a lot about cars. So we, as the viewer, though, we get to see these pictures, and we don't get clued in onto how it's a clue, unfortunately, unless you're very like mechanically minded, very, very, very car oriented. I like to pride myself on solving a few mysteries in movies here and there, like figuring out The Last of Sheila, which is another movie we've done in this courtroom before.
Pixar didn't happen.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You can't figure out where they're going just looking at those pictures, so that's a little disappointing. And then now you compare this to Injustice for All's conflict. I mean, Al Pacino's against everyone. He's against his partners, the judges, his friends. Like, friends become enemies, enemies become friends. There's a lot of depth there, and just like in My Cousin Vinny, where it's about justice and duty, so is everything Al Pacino's doing. He's trying really hard to get that black guy not to go to prison, but his lawyer friend messes it up, and that's why he messes up his car, right? He's trying really hard to get this innocent guy out of prison because he's innocent, but that guy snaps and he's not able to save him. So, like, we actually see these real conflicts, and then he could very easily get a win. He could very easily get this judge off on the charges, but he doesn't do it at the end. He blows up with the very famous line, like, "You're out of order, the whole trial's out of order." So we actually get some very interesting conflict and growth that we just don't get in My Cousin Vinny.
Mr. Eason, would you like to respond to those points?
Well, I will not quarrel with Dylan about Al Pacino. He does go through those things, but I will say that Vinny didn't really have smooth sailing. He it appeared that his clients were headed for the death penalty. There was powerful evidence against them. He was struggling to find a way out. His fiancée was tapping her foot on the floor and of the porch and saying her biological clock was ticking. What was it doing? Yeah. So anyway, he had a stressful movie. He did, and it didn't go smoothly. He got sent away to jail overnight twice for contempt. He had to wear a brown tuxedo to court, which would embarrass anyone. And at the end, he's behind the eight ball, and his fiance has left him, but the fate of his clients are in his hands, and he has to come up with something. And he's looking at these photos, and he sees that the two tire marks go across. One of them on a higher above the curb, one of them down lower on the road, and he realizes it can't be the 63 whatever it was that
Whatever the car is, it can't be their car.
Yeah, and so he becomes a hero. He puts Mona Lisa Vito in the position of being the hero to give the testimony, but he's the one who figures it out, and she's an expert mechanic, so she knows it. And so I agree. He has a happier movie than Al Pacino, who's got clients dying left and right, and a partner going crazy and throwing plates down the hall. But at the end, Joe Pesci comes to the fore, and justice is done.
Mr. Schlender, Mr. Eason would have us believe that a man who sleeps in a big bed with Marissa Tomei every night has a hard life.
Well, Your Honor, in the interest of time, I can move on to my last point, because I was just reviewing a few other points, and I basically made those already. So I just want to hammer home, because I think on a surface level, people might think My Cousin Vinny is the better movie for how it handles the humor. So I just want to focus on that comedy element of Injustice for All, because we have talked about a lot of the serious things in it. And Injustice for All, again, since it's that satire, it has more of a Kafka-esque feel, like things are just like spiraling out of control, not unlike the opening of Joe versus the Volcano, which we love so well in this courtroom. And framing the story of Injustice for All around these ethical concerns, it sets up those hilarious juxtapositions that I mentioned earlier. Al Pacino pointing out that it's his fine moral character is why he's needed to defend the felonious judge, and if he doesn't do it, they're going to destroy him because he actually doesn't have fine moral character. So we get to actually grapple in these funny situations with these idea of good men in bad situations or bad systems. And this leads up to the climax, obviously. And the climax of each movie provides catharsis. In Vinny, again, we're railroaded with a lot of information about cars to somehow put a bow on the case, even though we couldn't really follow along with these clues because it's all introduced at the last minute. In Injustice for All, though, the climax has been building that whole movie. Like I said, brick by brick. Al Pacino's frustrations mount and mount, and he throws it all away at the end to do the right thing as he sees it. And the movie ends with him. He's obviously going to be in deep shit. So while we're laughing at Joe Pesci's funny voices and turn of phrase, we are laughing maniacally with Al Pacino because we're in on the joke with him. We see the farce. We know he can't do anything about it. We know we can't do anything about it. And so that is what makes this the superior comedy and law movie. And I will rest there, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Eason, any rebuts to those points?
Yeah, let me just make one point. I was watching this, and this afternoon, I'd probably finished a beer by now because I was trying to struggle to get through it. And the scene, there was a scene in which Pacino confronted John Forsythe with the photos of John Forsythe dressed up in sex gear with the hooker, with the guy who was the head of the commission, proving that the committee was corrupt, and Pacino says, well, maybe he didn't say, but the judge says, so you want to know if I'm guilty? And he says, yes, I am. And Carrie was watching the movie with me, and I turned to her and I said, no possible way that could happen. Utterly incredible that this judge, who's sophisticated, who wants Al Pacino to give him his best defense to get him off is going to say, yes, I did violently rape this young woman. No possible way. It just was not. There was nothing credible about it. I mean, maybe it was intended as satire. If it was lost on me. I didn't find it believable or funny.
I think it speaks more to the extreme hubris of the judge character, knowing that he had Al Pacino by the oranges and he would have to defend him anyway.
Perhaps he had Al Pacino by the oranges, but like the movie, they were little tiny oranges.
They're called clementines.
Delicious. I just had one. And we've got some big apples. Now, all sides have rested their cases. The attorneys will now present their closing arguments. Mr. Eason, you may begin.
I'll make a short closing argument since I haven't prepared one. But I know that both of these movies are in evidence. We can talk about the movies. Dylan has made a very forceful presentation in support of what I believe is obviously a losing case. But both of these movies, I assume, are in evidence, and that the jury has the opportunity to watch them. So I say only this: watch the two movies. It's not a close call. You're talking about a comedy classic that people know and watch again, with great characters and with, lest you've forgotten, Marissa Tomei.
Oh, you hadn't mentioned. No.
Versus a very mediocre movie with a lousy script and an unbelievable plot. Just watch the movies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you'll come to the right conclusion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Eason. Mr. Schlender, you may present your closing argument.
Hooah! Your Honor, let's get back to justice.
It did help!
It does. What is the reals of justice? What is the intention of the reals of justice? The intention of justice is to see that the guilty movies are punished and the innocent are freed. Simple, isn't it? Only it's not that simple. Because we are doing a head-to-head. So me ripping off the rest of the speech will be attenuated at best. But here we go. Only we have a problem here. And you know what it is? Both sides want to win. We want to win. We want to win regardless of the truth. And we want to win regardless of justice. Regardless of who's the superior movie or not. Winning is everything. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have presented a case to end all cases. I have a superior and substantive messages. I have characters that I've referenced. Critic reviews that are backed up from here to Washington, D.C. So, the one thing that bothered me, the one thing that stayed in my mind and I couldn't get rid of it, that haunted me was why. Why would anyone think My Cousin Vinny is better? And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm going to keep this tortured butchering of Al Pacino going. No, because I'm going to get him. My client and Justice for All should be found the superior movie. The movie is superior. That movie there, that movie is fantastic. It is fantastic. And if it is allowed to win, something really right is going on here.
Is that the whole thing?
No, I told you it was really butchered. I mean, the movie ends with him throwing his client under the bus. I can't throw my client under the bus.
I know. Bailiff, will you please drag Mr. Schlender kicking and screaming out of the...
Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor.
Wait 1 second. He's being dragged out of the...
You're out of order. You killed him. Let's make a deal. I just completed my closing statement.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear.
Thank God.
Thank you all. Members of
Your Honor, it's customary for the plaintiff in a civil case to have a rebuttal on closing. Could I have a one-sentence rebuttal, please?
Marissa Tomei.
Is it Marissa Tomei?
No.
Or I'll let you do it this time because you're a fancy lawyer, but we're not a real court. We don't usually do it, but we'll let you do
You
it.
don't know anything about precedent.
One
Can I
sentence.
come back in now?
Everything that guy just said is bullshit.
Thank you. Good. Worth it. Worth it. Thank you all. Members of the jury, Mr. Maynard Bangs, Mr. Big Ben Haslar, and Mr. Dead On Balls Accurate, Ryan Luis Rodriguez. You have
Yes.
all heard the facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine which film is the superior movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict.
Right this way. And if any of you are wondering where I've been, well, to be frank, I got fed up with the Reels of Justice process after watching X vs. Sever take the stand. Nay, before have I seen such a baddie so vile. I had to spend 4 years of PTO, so I went on a wee journey. I saw the banes of my forebears. I saw the Highlands of Scotland, met a bonny wee lass, sailed the misty locks, tried to get my noggin clear again. I was taking a dram of whiskey outside a pub in Edinburgh when out the window I caught a glimpse of a lad looking at Spy Kids Armageddon in a video rental contraption. I thought to myself, I could have saved that lad. Had we only brought that film to court, we might have kept him from Spy Kids, from Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, from Indy 5, Dial of Destiny. And without a second thought, I booked a red-eye flight back to the States, told the state it was time for me to roll up my sleeves again, which is why it is my honor to lead you to this deliberation room.
Gee, thanks,
Yeah.
bailiff.
Hey, look! I just went and poured myself a glass of wine. Did I miss anything important?
Nope. Not
No.
a damn thing.
Well, the point that resonated with me the longest was watch the two movies, because I did. I had never seen
always
My
do.
Cousin Vinny before. No, but let me tell my story. I had never seen the two movies before. And I watched My Cousin Vinny, and I loved it. I had always been on my watch list. I kind of regretted that I didn't buy it rather than renting it. And I was in such a good mood that I was like, okay, let's keep this double feature rolling. And I saw Injustice for All, and that just killed my good time. Ryan, what did you think of the case?
Well, I was amazed that the one thing that I was really bagging on My Cousin Vinny for was never brought up by prosecution or defense, and that is the opening of the movie hinges on the flimsiest contrivance revolving around characters never communicating as human beings. Not once did the sheriff say, "So you killed him." He just lets the guy basically walk himself into a grave. Whereas if you were actually the sheriff, you would spell out what he was walking himself into. And the movie does not get to the courtroom without that completely unearned little bit of back and forth repartee. But that said, this is a case between a gentleman 6, and Justice for All, and a gentleman 7, My Cousin Vinny. And when I look at My Cousin Vinny, I the entire time I watch the movie, I go, God, do I miss when Joe Pesci was in movies. Like, we really had it good back in the day. We didn't realize how good we had it. Yes, Marissa Tomei is phenomenal, absolutely deserved to win the Academy Award, but I think Pesci gets slept on a little bit, and that's a bummer. And as for, like, Injustice for All, you have Norman Jewison directing it, who has the strangest filmography. He did the Thomas Crown Affair, he did Rollerball, he did Fiddler on the Roof. The definition of a journeyman who can make anything competently like a less talented Michael Curtiz. And in watching the movie, my copy was in full frame, but it never panned and scanned because the focus is always in the dead center of the composition, so it looked like television. It looked very flat, which is weird because it was shot by the cinematographer of Xanadu and Pee-wee's Big Adventure. You would expect a little more visual panache. But I do not hate the movie. Clearly, Brooks is not a fan. I'm lukewarm on it. I really don't care. By the time we get to the trial, I've already wanted to move on and watch something else. And the sterling thing about My Cousin Vinny is the trial itself is fucking phenomenal. It makes me forgive
I would say both films.
the contrivance at the beginning. Because that every single time that they introduce a new witness and Vinny grills them, it gets increasingly more impressive and funnier as it goes, but without losing a sense of plausibility. But I'll let you guys speak. I spoke far too much.
You spoke. Maynard, what did you think? Which case resonated with you the most?
Well, I definitely see Brooks's points in. I mean, obviously, Marissa Tomei is lovely.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree she's the standout of the two films. Problem is, she's not the lead of My Cousin Vinny. She's the supporting actor, really, and she's only in the movie probably less than half the time. I think Pacino is hanging with her, but he's in the entire movie. So I think performance to performance, scene to scene, it's Tomei, but overall, I think Pacino's in more of the movies. So
what about all cast to all cast?
Gosh, I mean, obviously Fred Gwynn is great, but Schlender is right about them being sort of cookie cutter and flat. And frankly, I want to punch Ralph Macchio the whole time. It's like, do you know you're going to jail, you idiot? You handsome moron. Like, do you have any idea what's going on? And his friend's not stupid, so I don't know why his friends... Ryan's completely right. But we didn't hear it. But it did kind of bug me. And it bugged me that Pesci was able to basically solve the whole thing himself. Like, it's explained why Marissa Tomei knows cars so well. It's never explained why Pesci does.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, he does say somewhere that
you're not in this room, Mr. Eason. You're not allowed in the deliberation room.
He's bringing us wine. I like it.
That's fine. So I love the point about New York and South. So I'd say, like, you look at all the cast. I mean, it's obviously more dynamic for Vinny, right? I mean, they've got all the great little cameos that come through. Both the New York characters that we see in the South, that fish out of water element, that's all great. But like you said, And Justice for All bummed you out. And it's supposed to. It's supposed to be a punch in the gut. And like when they say it's a comedy, Slenso's right. It's a satire. So it's like Catch-22 or MASH. Like, you don't laugh. Like, you don't laugh out loud, except when you put your hand in your head and you go, for fuck's sake. God, is everybody crazy? And Justice for All did it.
They got those drawn out sequences, right? Like the helicopter and like the judge firing the gun. Like this sort of thing is, those
didn't work for me at all. You're right. And if you watch things like MASH, you'll find weird things like that. And but like when Tambor comes over and explains how the case he just won, that guy just went and killed 2 kids. And you're like, oh shit, like your whole stomach falls out your ass. You're like, oh god damn. And then the stupid lawyer who takes over and gets like basically the main client we saw most of the movie screwed over. Oh, that made me so mad. So I think the film was very effective at making me extremely mad at the situation they create in the legal system, which I think Brooks is right. It's not an accurate representation. But I thought both movies were really good.
Well, we're short on time, so are we ready to lock in? Maynard, where are you at?
I'm going to... I'll put a monkey in the wrench. I'll speak for Pacino, and I'll go with Injustice for All.
Ryan? Gentleman 7?
I have 0 fucks left to give, so I'm just here to promote whichever case I thought did a better job. And I gotta say, Dylan, despite the fact that I did not like the movie as much, Dylan gave the stronger case, so I'm gonna go Injustice for All.
I could not disagree with you guys more.
I was giving a dissenting opinion. I'm changing. No, I do think Cousin Vinny's better. I just wanted to put in a word for Pacino. Yes, I am. Until we leave here, I can change the vote all I want. But I was just trying to put in I like.
You're just trying to make Dylan feel better. I got you.
No, I think I think they're closer films. So I don't think it should be unanimous in favor of Vinny, but I do think it should be in favor of Vinny. I think they both highlight a lot of the problems with the legal system. Vinny does it in a more lightweight and entertaining way.
Yeah, and it hits the marks that it's meant to. Pacino is great. I did like that closing sequence, and I did finally get to hear that reference that I've heard so many times about the whole courtroom being out of order. But that's all it's got. It's just got Pacino. It's got nothing else. Nothing else really worked for me. Vinny has Marissa Tomei. The casting is fantastic. That grits bit is perfect. It's clever in the way that it writes the no villains. I love that deer monologue. Every minute of this thing I was enjoying myself. The winner is clearly for me, My Cousin Vinny. So let's go tell that very handsome judge.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a controversial verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of My Cousin Vinny versus And Justice for All, we find in favor of My Cousin Vinny!
Mamma mia! We've done enough to the Italian Defamation League that we can't have My Cousin Vinny lose, too. I didn't have a verdict written because this was all sprung up on me, but how about we put And Justice for All on probation for 3 weeks? Court is adjourned.
There you go. That's a great callback.
Hey there, this is Al Pacino, star of Jack and Jill and Manglehorn, no relation, reporting to you from live outside the Reels of Justice, which you may remember from the motion picture I made, or did somebody else make, And Justice for All. Dylan J. Schlender, would you care to share your thoughts on the jury's verdict? Hoo-ah, that was my catchphrase in Scent of a Woman.
Wow, Al Pacino himself. I hope my impression didn't bug you too much.
No, it was fine.
I gotta say, this was a lot of fun. This case, I will say, I'll put my cards on the table. I think My Cousin Vinny is the better movie. I was impressed by Injustice for All, though. That's definitely one that's probably gonna end up. I'll probably end up watching it again. I think we all know that the best courtroom drama movie ever is Presumed Innocent, and we'll talk about that another day. I would just like to say to Brooks, for his first time coming into court, fantastic job.
Our court.
Well, our real court. That was just excellent. It was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun arguing the case with him, so look forward to doing it again. Thank you.
Thank you, and may I add, she had a great ass. That's from Heat. Brooks Eason, you put in a great case. Not The Godfather Part 3 great, but decent enough. How do you feel about the verdict?
I was troubled at one point that it might be close because my movie was far better. But I will compliment Dylan. He did a wonderful job supporting a mediocre movie, and I had a great movie. And I had Marissa Tomei.
Thank you. That's all we have from the courthouse today. Let's go back to the studio for post-trial analysis. I'm off to record ADR for the director's cut of The Insider. I'm Al Pacino.
Wow. Al Pacino, ladies and gentlemen. What an honor.
Man,
Unbelievable.
He says we can't get big names.
like Al Pacino.
I do like Al Pacino. But no, great case. And Brooks, I think you're a little hard on Injustice for All. Maybe because you're very close to it. But maybe from an outsider, I think it puts together a preposterous world on purpose.
Well, and he had to go against it too. So
yeah, so now you can admit you secretly
had to
love it.
bring
Maybe
it.
I was, Carrie and I were sitting there looking at each other thinking, this is supposed to be a good movie. And we didn't think it was, I was not as hard.
I think it was good at the time. I don't know that it's aged well.
It's good for a 70s movie.
maybe that's what it was, but I just thought a lot of it was just. I understand satire and dealing with the legal business and being in the defense, being in the criminal justice system in Baltimore, which would be a terribly depressing thing to do. But just a lot of it was not believable to me.
Well, you would know. You've been there, right? So now, besides this, when you're, what keeps you busy? What have you been up to?
Me?
Yeah, you're here to talk about you now.
So
this is a great time to plug anything you want or discuss whatever you like.
So I've been trying to plug the Scoutmaster, which you've got, my latest book, and I'm not officially retired from the practice of law, but I haven't worked a single minute this year, which is
me either.
Which is a signifier of retirement. I've still got one big client that I'm on call for, and I've started on, I love writing, and I've written 5 books, and it's fun. It's not lucrative, but that's okay. And so I've started on 3 books, and I've got to figure out which one. Maybe I'll do all 3, but I can't do them simultaneously. I'm not that smart. So I got to decide which one.
Tell it to George R. Martin.
So one of them is about stories from my legal career, and I've got some great stories. I defended a number of blue-collar sexual harassment cases in the 1990s, and so I've got great stories from that. I can write the penis trifecta, the penis trilogy. And I've got these, and I had these
The
great
Holy Trinity.
Yeah, so I'll tell you one. So I had this case, and it was in trial in federal court on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and this woman was testifying, and she had said that she had testified that the plaintiff, who was suing, my client and his company for sexual harassment, was had taken a shine to this other guy and wanted to sleep with him based on a photo that she had seen of him.
I'm sorry, I'm imagining a very flattering photo of him.
Well, it was evidently a frontal photo.
Yes.
Yeah, and so the
Maybe close up, but maybe not.
I don't think it needed to be close up.
Yeah, maybe it didn't need to be exactly.
So
he was across the street. Actually, it was.
Yeah. It
was taken with the Hubble telescope.
Yeah. So the plaintiff's lawyer is cross-examining her, the witness, and she's not very sophisticated or very articulate, and so she's kind of struggling, and she realizes that what she's talking about is not especially appropriate, and he's pressing her. What was it about this photo? What was the big deal about the photo? And she said, well, she just wanted to, the plaintiff wanted this guy because of this photo, and everybody in the courtroom except the plaintiff's lawyer knew what she was saying, but he didn't. So finally, the plaintiff's lawyer's pressing her, and she leans over and looks at the judge and says, "Should I tell him, Judge?" And the federal judge, a fine guy, but with a great sense of humor, and says, "He wants to know. I don't know why, but you can tell him." And at that point, emboldened by a federal judge, she leaned into the microphone and said, "He was hung like a horse."
I'm surprised.
Man, I want that on the record for me someday, but not under those circumstances.
No kidding.
Oh man.
Well, I mean, the question is whether he'd have to be if she was under oath, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's true.
We should.
But no, those are interesting. And what's your newest book? Is this also legal stories?
So my newest book that's been published is The Scoutmaster, which is a biography of my father, Dylan Hassett, and it's so my father, Paul Eason, was a Boy Scout leader in Tupelo, Mississippi, where I grew up, for almost 61 years, and he had more than 350 young men who became Scoutmasters under his leadership, and bragging about him has been one of my hobbies since I've been an adult, because he was the best man I've ever known, and he died 10 years ago. And so, almost 2 years ago, I decided to write a book about him, and I interviewed more than 40 people about him, including men who became Eagle Scouts under his leadership in every decade from the 1940s to the 1990s. And so, that's my newest book, The Scoutmaster, which was published 3 months ago.
That sounds very personal, and
it's an excellent book. Some of the testimonials you got about your father are really moving, and you had the one guy who's like 90 years old who remembers him so fondly. It's a very powerful book and a great message for today too. Just it's nice reading about someone so decent,
Yeah.
Where have they all gone?
No.
Now
none of them are in this courtroom, unfortunately.
Hey, Ryan is great.
That's
now,
true. I'm
Brooks,
sorry,
we
Ryan.
always ask for recommendations from our guests for movies that you think people should see. So, what is a movie that you think people should see?
Dylan
It could be your
warned me
favorite
about
movie
this.
or just the last
Dylan
one you
warned
saw?
me about this, and we one briefly that I actually went to the movie to see, which was the new Mission Impossible movie.
Mhm.
I'm not a Tom Cruise guy at all, but that is a fine movie. If you haven't seen it, it's obviously far better to watch in the theater because it's got great. There's a great scene at the end of the movie where a train's falling off tracks, and so I recommend that. But the one that I was gonna, which is more like My Cousin Vinny, which is old, so I've seen it, is Best in Show. Have y'all seen? Have y'all seen
Great
Best
movie.
in Show?
Several
It's,
times.
It's got dogs, it's got humor, it's got a great cast. I don't even know the name of the actor who
Any
played it.
Marissa Tomei in it?
No, that would have
To its
dialed it
detriment.
up. That would have dialed Marissa Tomei with a Irish setter, sweet. But the best. I don't know the name of the name of the actor, but the best role in the movie is the guy who plays one of the announcers for the Westminster Dog Show, who doesn't
Fred
know
Willard.
anything. Yeah. Oh God, he's magnificent in that show. He's great. So
R.I.P.
Best in
We
Show.
lost him too soon.
In his final film appearance
Oh, when did he pass?
of that week.
Was that recent, Ryan? That Fred Willard
2
passed,
years
or am
ago,
I
I
out of the
think.
loop?
Mhm.
I think 2 years.
God, he was a funny. Everything he was in was hilarious.
He's still funny. Schlenzo, what's your recommendation?
My recommendation actually sprang from watching My Cousin Vinny because I love Fred Gwynn. And he was in a made-for-TV movie called... Well, I'm not going to do that. Mr. Gambini. So, he was in a TV movie called Vanishing Act from 1986. And as regular listeners know, I do love solving mysteries in movies. So imagine my delight at figuring out the twist to this feature. Despite some decisions that the movie's made that do not actually service this twist, but, it's kind of like if you're not paying that much attention, you'll be fine. So the essentials of this movie is a man has reported his wife missing, and a woman that he claims is not his wife shows up and turns his life upside down, and he can't get anyone to believe him. The movie is very simple and unpretentious, but the mystery unfolds naturally and will leave you satisfied. Fred Gwynn takes a great turn as a menacing priest, and Elliot Gould as a deracinated New York detective in the Rocky Mountains is perfectly executed. Amazing for us who live in the future that this is available on YouTube for free. But despite it just being a TV movie, I think it should be given a proper 4K release. What say you, Ryan Luis Rodriguez?
Sure, I mean, I'd be the only one buying it, but yeah, let's do it.
I know, and it would delight me to know when to know you had it, because you'd like this movie.
Even Schlenzo wouldn't buy it. Now, my recommendation this week is just about the only legal procedural film I ever watch regularly. And procedural is an understatement. 1957's 12 Angry Men.
Nice.
Taking place entirely in a sweltering New York deliberation room, 12 jurors discussing the facts in a murder trial discover how heavily their own prejudices and biases weigh in the decision. Although you don't see any of the trial itself, the details of the crime are well covered by the Oscar-nominated dialogue. And while most of the characters don't have any names, they all have distinctive personalities and biases, as I mentioned before, and are brought to life by some amazing performances from Henry Fonda, Martin Balsam, Ed Begley, and of course the great Lee J. Cobb. It received several nominations, including Best Director for Sidney Lumet, who does a marvelous job making the shots closer and tighter as the deliberation drags out, so the tiny, overheated, overcrowded jury room feels smaller and smaller and more claustrophobic as the film goes on. That's my whole thing. I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Yeah, I know.
It's
Like,
just-
we used
it's
to have
just
that wrap
too-
up, and
it's
now
just
none
too
of us
hard to
know.
navigate. It's just too hard to navigate when I can tell you where to go things. I don't care. Don't find the movie. Big Ben, what have you got?
For my objectimendation, I'm going to go with a pre-Shining, pre-Space 2001, and pre-Spartacus Kubrick by plugging 1957's Paths of Glory, which centers around how a World War I commanding officer played by Kirk Douglas defends in court his officers who were commanded to advance upon an enemy in an unwinnable scenario, and instead they opted to retreat. The film shows how those in power, safe in their lavish offices, often come to not see the people at the bottom rungs of their organizations as people, but as pawns, to be worked and discarded to achieve their means. There is no sympathy shown for a single officer who is ordered to take an entire bunker single-handedly when all of his comrades around him had fallen under gunfire. If retreat is allowed in this case, Who's to say entire battalions could retreat against orders? In this courtroom, all human emotion can be drowned out by the citing of precedent and what-ifs and legalese. The story is intelligent and multifaceted. Kirk Douglas's portrayal is charismatic, and Kubrick shows that even early on he knew how to frame and light a scene. And even after all this time, perhaps we still haven't learned anything about the nature of war and the nature of authority.
One of my favorites. It's one of the best war movies, and Kubrick, I know he scattered a whole lot of like details in all of those like no man's land scenes, like little pieces of fabric and stuff. And I guess they told him while he's making the movie, no one's gonna be able to see that. And he said, but they'll be able to feel it. I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
Ryan, why don't you send us on home?
My recommendation this week is technically 4 films, but if you watch them together, they make one short feature. And that's Wes Anderson's collection of Roald Dahl shorts, The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, Poison, The Swan, and The Rat Catcher. These shorts mostly share cast members like Benedict Cumberbatch, Ben Kingsley, Dev Patel, Rupert Friend, and Ralph Fiennes as Dahl himself. Anderson weaves the text into his aesthetic by having the actors breathlessly provide their dialogue and Dahl's incredibly specific descriptions in a way that feels unreal, but nobody goes to see a Wes Anderson movie for an accurate rendering of reality. With shifting sets and his unique way of making his compositions so symmetrical, these shorts are basically feature-long callbacks to stuff like the Let Me Tell You About My Boat sequence from The Life Aquatic, an avant-garde theatrical experience I just wish that they would actually come to the cinema. No luck. The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, Poison, The Swan, and The Rat Catcher are currently streaming on Netflix. Yuck.
Agreed. Not worth the $21.
I have just not missed my Netflix subscription in all these years.
Yeah, well, they don't put anything on there. But with that, we are all out of show, but we want to thank our guest, Brooks Eason, for joining us. Thank you, Brooks.
You're welcome, and I want to thank y'all for selecting movies that were made in 1957. It was a great year for movies and to be born.
Too bad I stuttered all over it, right?
Well, 12 Angry Men, right? Yours was 57 too. We both did 57. 12 Angry Men's 57 as well.
I was.
My movies were 57 too.
That is not true, Brian.
So to tee this up for next time, I was born on July the 3rd, 1957, in a home for unwed mothers in New Orleans, Louisiana, to a rich heiress whose identity I learned when I was almost 50.
That sounds like a novel.
Do I have to buy the book?
There is a book about it.
Excellent. I will read this book. But Brooks, we'd love to have you back as well. I think you've got a head for this whole lawyer thing, so I would stick with it. But we hope that you'll join us again as well, and we hope everyone else will join us too, as the reels of justice keep turning.
Count it.
I'm Al Pacino.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.